Some surprising news out of the Leafs camp today as a former Maple Leafs backup goalie might be eyeing a return to the organization. We'll be breaking that down. Plus, standout prospect Easton Cowan continues to prove himself to coaches and staff. And is there a real chance that he could maybe make the Maple Leafs roster? All that and more on this episode of Leafs Digest. But before we get into that stuff, a quick reminder that this video is sponsored by Rentals.ca. Rentals.ca is Canada's largest apartment hunting network. You can find houses, apartments, condos, whatever you could possibly want.
All over Canada from coast to coast, in cities like Toronto, Vancouver, Halifax, Montreal, St. John's. My favorite thing is the website. It's super clean and easy to use. The maps are also super useful and easy to navigate, where you can use these to find any apartment you want on any street you like. So you can just see where you're going to live just before you even go look at it.
Exactly, and it's a product that I have used, right? Like, we like Rentals.ca. We've used it at some point in our lives, and I used it to find the apartment I'm living in now. It's a fantastic platform, highly suggested, and you guys are in luck. There's currently a contest going on to win a month of free rent. You have to be 18 years or older to apply, and the contest ends on October 2nd, so you only have 5 or 6 days left. But if you're interested in winning a month of free rent, fill out the form in the link down below. And guys, you probably have seen their billboards everywhere. Rentals.ca is all across the country, Canada's largest apartment hunting network. So if you are looking for your next home, apartment, condo, whatever it may be, Rentals.ca has you covered. Mark, let's dive into this video, and we got to talk a bit about Easton Cowan. And boy, he could be in for a potential breakout year. Now, will that be at the NHL level? Will that be at the OHL level? I guess we don't really know yet. However, he has been phenomenal. In a tweet from Luke Fox today, Sheldon Keefe said that he's going back to Easton Cowan on Wednesday in St. Thomas. The game, yeah, of course, the game today. Seems like almost every day he's out there, you come away thinking he was one of the best players on the ice. So just keep stacking together good days and see what happens. Now, Easton Cowan's a bit of a surprise, at least to me, Mark, to be playing as well as he has throughout, the prospect camps and training camp, and now eventually into the preseason. But he's been really proving himself to the coaching staff. Do you see any world where Easton Cowan actually cracks this Leafs roster with the way he's been playing?
Well, the big thing we can look at this is just it's so impressive being 18 years old,
Yeah.
just to make this impact, to win management over, win coaching over, to the point where they're hanging on to him and not just sending him back to the OHL. We see a lot of times these younger guys, as soon as training camp is starting to conclude, they get sent down pretty quickly, but they're sticking around with him. We just seen when he played his last game, he was just on a mission. He had a penalty shot, he had a couple breakaways. He drew a penalty, which ultimately did lead to Mitch Marner scoring a goal to send it to OT. And he looks like he belongs here, which is just insane. When we first drafted this guy late in the first round, everyone kind of looked at him and was like, who is this guy? This is a bit of a reach. This guy could be a second, a third kind of round guy. But overall, it's been super impressive. I know the NHL has this thing where 10 games in, if you're on a rookie deal, you will burn your ELC at the 10th game. So I could see a situation where if we see a couple injuries, I know Kelly Youngkrook is just on a day-to-day kind of injury basis right now. We have a couple guys out. Bobby McMahon still fighting back from his injury. But overall, I could see this guy making the team, especially early on in the season where we're just kind of testing things out. I don't see any issue with just kind of giving this guy a run, giving him a couple games, if that's something like 2 games, all the way up to 9. But I wouldn't give him that 10th to burn the first year of his entry level contract.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense, right? You're giving that guy the chance to prove himself at the NHL level. Now, you hear a lot of talk about prospects and rushing prospects, but I feel like 9 games is hardly considered rushing. Like, I understand he's a small guy at 18 years old. I mean, like, he's still growing into his body, right? And he had 50 odd points in the OHL last year, and obviously the OHL is where he's going to eventually end up this year. I think that's almost certain. But would you consider those 9 games, if he gets that chance with the Leafs, would you consider that rushing a prospect, or would you consider that just very valuable experience to be able to play at the NHL level before heading back to the O?
Oh, I think it'd definitely be with experience because you kind of give this guy a taste of the NHL. It would almost make him thrive to get here. He knows what it would taste like. He'd get into some action. If he scored a goal, he would just be thinking all year about the second goal, making the team and just making this impact again. So overall, I don't have an issue with, playing him 3, 4, 5 games, just giving him a bit of experience, especially if we're tight against the cap, which we are, or if we have a couple injuries, you could definitely call him up, send him back to the OHL, let him play his entire year out. And if he stands out and impresses in the OHL, just call him up for the AHL playoffs. You could call him up for the NHL. We've seen it with Shane Wright last year. He played 7 games for the Kraken. Then he went back down to the minors. and then he ultimately did come up and play the AHL playoffs. So we could see a situation like this where the Leafs do want to try him. We've seen Nyes join the team late last year. So if he continues to impress and his development looks good, I see no problem with just playing this guy a handful of games just to get him the taste of the NHL and showcase himself.
Yeah, for sure. And at 18 years old, like you said, it's very impressive, especially with the fairly low expectations a lot of Leafs fans had of him. So awesome to watch. We'll definitely be monitoring this season. But let's dive into this very interesting topic here, and that's a potential surprising Leafs return. And we're gonna flash this up here. It's a name that a lot of you guys are probably familiar with, and that is Curtis McElhinney. Of course, Curtis McElhinney is currently 40 years old. He was a former backup goalie for the Leafs and many other teams. He's a Stanley Cup winner as well, so he brings that kind of pedigree to any organization he goes to. But it says sounds there's been some conversations with the Leafs as McElhinney is looking to get back into the game, but nothing serious yet. Something to keep an eye on. Now, a lot of people are speculating, what does get back into the game really mean? Could this really mean Curtis McElhinney could come back in some kind of capacity as a goalie? I mean, this Leafs organization has a lot of goalies in their system, whether it's in the minors or in the NHL. But maybe a more reasonable option would be as a goalie coach. And as David Alter says, he's been around Leafs practice and he's wearing a team jacket. However, the team did lose John Elkin to the Penguins, so there is that. So all signs seem to maybe be pointing to Curtis McElhinney coming back in some kind of goalie coach capacity. But I wanted to ask you first, wouldn't it just be hilarious to see him actually play goalie again? Okay, is there even a 1% chance that that is what the Leafs want to do with him?
I think we'd have to get into the situation of Samsonov and Wall getting hurt.
Yeah.
Jones claimed off waivers. We have Petroselli and Hillaby. I don't see it happening at all.
Well, but it'd be a little funny, but regardless, I mean, I saw some speculation that he could maybe come in some kind of goalie coach capacity, whether it's to replace Elkin or like again with the Marlies or even with the Growlers. Do you think that that is maybe a more reasonable thing for McElhinney? And if it is, what kind of value do you see him bringing to the Leafs organization?
I think it would be a huge value. You kind of get this guy that's been in the league for so long. He's been mostly a backup his whole career, but he just won the Stanley Cup. He's a guy that knows how to play in this league, and especially a guy that knows how to play in this current league.
Mhm.
Not someone where they might be 50, 60 years old. They played 20, 30 years ago, where they're kind of getting their feet wet in what the NHL looks like today. But this guy knows how to play against these guys. And for the development, even for a guy like Samsonov, Wall, he can teach them so much. And especially when you look at the Marlies and the Growlers, this guy just at 40, I don't know if he'll play another NHL game, but I think just the experience, just being able to teach these guys and just help out and just be a great development for everyone.
Yeah, and there's an underrated aspect with guys like McElhinney who kind of make careers as never being the star of their team, never even really being a major player on their team, right? He's had moments where he's had stretches of great starts. Sure, of course, he's been a solid NHL goalie, but he carved out a long career as sort of a role player, if you want to say it in that regard. And I feel like that kind of thing is very important, especially when you have young goalies, which the Leafs have multiple of in their system right now. When you're able to teach these goalies who might not project to become stars, the kind of discipline and hard work it takes to carve out a career like McElhinney has had, that kind of discipline and humility it takes to accept that role and keep finding jobs, all the way into his mid late 30s, that kind of thing I think is extremely valuable for a goalie system like the Leafs have.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. You never know with goalies. You could have a really down year with a couple of your goalies. You might see a couple injuries. I mean, as Leafs fans, we've seen it. We've seen last year with Samsonov, we had Freddie Anderson, and the list goes on. But you kind of get in the situation too where he knows the system. He's been around this team. He was a backup with his team as well. So if you really got into a situation where you had to sign a guy, at least you'd have a goalie that knows the system. I mean, I don't think I'd trust a 40-year-old McElhinney to come in and save the day and win us a cup. But I think it'd be hilarious if we kind of just signed him onto this role of a development coach, and he ultimately did sign with us if a couple injuries happened.
Well, I mean, look, if he is the emergency backup and he has to come into the game for the other team, it's a lot better to lose to a Curtis McElhinney than it is to a certain Zamboni driver. But that'll do it for this news edition of Leafs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, a comment, subscribe to the channel, guys. We're on the road to 5,000 subs. We'd love to hit that before the end of the year, and you can help us out with that goal. I'm Josh Goss for my co-host Mark Pye. We'll catch you in the next one.